Welcome to this episode of the Strong Kind Podcast. This episode is with Cillian O'Connor. Cillian is a strength coach, personal trainer, Instagram meme lord. He's a really cool guy. He has his master's in sports performance. I think exercise science. Like super cool dude. Great discussion. He runs a podcast called The Philosophy of Strength. Me and him got into some deep topics today. It was a lot of fun. We talked training, we talked life, we talked why people do stuff, and he talked about a little bit of a back injury that he's working through. Really enjoyed it. You can find him at Dysfunctional Patterns on Instagram. He also runs a Train Heroic group called Dysfunctional Gainz on Train Heroic. Check Cillian out. Super cool guy. Enjoy this episode. Like, I know you're working through a back injury. How's that coming along?
Yeah, thanks. The back is coming along slowly but surely. I wouldn't be surprised, if I had gone to get an MRI that maybe there would have been like some kind of a disc bulge there or something like that. But I didn't want to go that route because I know that I would freak myself out if I did something like that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been the most challenging injury that I've had just because it's very slow. It doesn't go very linearly in terms of like sometimes I'll do something that feels pretty challenging in the gym, like on deadlifts, and the next day I'm fine. And then I'll do something that feels totally fine when I'm in the gym, and the next day my back is flared up. And the main thing I get actually is like this sort of numbness or pins and needles and kind of like a nervy sensation in my foot, my left foot. Um, but look, my capacity in terms of what I can handle before something like that happens has gone up a lot. I'm able to do a lot more movement than I could with my back a few months ago. So it's getting better. It's taking a lot of patience, and I'm working with a guy who's a really good physio as well. So
That's
it could
good.
be worse.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, I think this is one of the things I always go back to is like, are we being dickheads when we're like, your body's adaptable and you can heal? Like, and then you go through an injury. Like, I basically like tweaked my groin in December running
Right.
sprints, and it sucks. Like, it's still, it's not like, it hasn't been linear, things don't feel great. I haven't really like talked about it a lot, and because it's not really
Mm.
debilitating, and just like you're just stiff faster, right? And like, back pain, especially what you got going on, it's scary. Like, it sucks. But the alternative a lot of times, like, to actually like, you know I honestly think a lot of it, how I think about it, is like it's probably six of one, half dozen of the other. Where like if you were to go get like a discectomy or something like that, like
Mm.
your recovery journey would probably be very similar to like what you're doing. So it's like
Yeah.
why not just like let myself heal? And we know that they can heal given time and
Mm.
appropriate dosage of things, right? But it does suck. So I feel for you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, see, this is the thing. I've had a lot of people ask me, "What did you do to your back?" Like they kind of want to know what the diagnosis is,
Yeah.
and they're kind of surprised when I'm like, "I don't know," because they're like, "Well, how are you rehabbing it then?" And it's like the process is going to be the same regardless. Regardless, if I go in to get an MRI and a doctor points at a scan and says you did this to your disc, or there's nothing there, I'm still going to have to go into the gym. I'm still going to have to pick weights that are appropriate and don't seem to trigger any symptoms. And it's probably going to take the same amount of time. So I know I'm not going to go for back surgery, so there's no point in me going in and just freaking myself out for the sake of being able to say, "Oh, this is exactly what's going on."
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of got me to buy into like me as a physio and a coach more, is like it's really just course correcting over and over again. And I think
Mm.
having an objective, somebody outside of you that you trust helping you with that, who's not going to
Mhm.
freak you the F out all the time, is really
Yeah,
valuable. Right. Whereas I think like there was a phase where I'm like, does anything matter? And it's like, I think things matter. I think having help matters. And I think having
yeah,
guidance matters. And we're really like, dude, it's hard for me to like dial like back ever,
yeah.
right? Like,
You love training, yeah.
yeah, you want to like push, and like so I think it was you, me and you have, you read the Little Black Book of Training Wisdom, right? By Dan Cleather.
Yeah, yeah, he was actually the head of my master's degree.
Dude. So, I mean that makes sense because like he's a positive influence and he's nuanced and like so much of training really should be kind of like relatively easy, yet we like always just want to make it hard because like kind of challenging yourself and making it hard feels good, right? But
Yeah.
that, I mean, so much of like any of this process is just this non-linear, like kind of trusting the process, and it's really hard day to day to trust the process. Like I'm kind of diligently tracking macros. And I was just super hungry yesterday. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna have my wife made cookies, and I had like six of them. And I'm like, fuck, I fucked up. I screwed up, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, at the end of the day, like if I just don't do that all the time, I'm okay. But like you feel in that moment like you screwed up, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of did screw up. But it's the same with like injury. Like if you have a good few days and then you go back into like a little bit of a valley, you feel like you
Mhm.
screwed up, even though it's probably just the normal trajectory of things
Yeah.
that they're going to have a
Well,
decline.
I think that's the most important value that a coach can bring to the table for somebody because, like I said, the guy that I'm working at at the moment, Tristan Jacobs, he's a really good physiotherapist, but the main value he's providing for me isn't giving me loads of super secret rehab exercises I didn't know about, or you know, doing manual therapy on me or getting me to foam roll or anything like that. It's that when I have a week that just seems chaotic and unfair and my back is flared up and things aren't going the way that I expect and I want them to, I have an objective third party there who I can go to who can say all the things that I could tell myself if I was working on it just purely by myself of like, look, this is just part of the process. You're going to have weeks that are worse than others. If you look at where you are now compared to where you were a few months ago, you're still doing way better. It's just so much easier to believe that when you have somebody else who you know you're paying and has your back and has a plan put in place for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like the main benefit. And that's why I wanted to reach out to somebody because I was like, this is too important for me to let, you know, my rehab be at the whim of how I'm feeling on a certain week and the stupid little voice in my head who's going to say, you used to be able to squat 200 kilos and now you're only doing squats with like 40 kilos and that's triggering your back pain. And like all of that stuff is where you can really mess yourself up if you don't have somebody else to bounce ideas off of or even just kind of vent to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I think the number one thing that we probably see and maybe to some extent harp on, is just not like not acknowledging the psychological and the emotional aspects of training
Yeah.
and injury and even life, right? Because like a lot of people are going to the gym because they're just trying to deal with their anxiety, or they're trying to deal with
Sure, yeah.
just life, right? And it feels good to show up, and hopefully it feels good to show up and work on yourself for a little while. But
Mhm.
like what's that really about, and why are you adding like I have a guy right now who's like he read the blue book, and we can get into that, or we don't have to get into it, but he read the blue book. He saw the progression from 135 pounds to 405 over the course of like 12 weeks, and it's like he wants that. and
Yeah.
uh and it's like I'm like, dude, that guy is not you. That example is such a neat drawn out linear progression. Like that rarely works for people,
So I
right?
actually haven't read, you're talking about the starting strength, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I actually haven't read, is the blue book just the original starting strength
Yeah,
one?
it's
I
like it's the
practical
updated version.
programming.
Yeah, it's the updated
Okay.
version.
So practical programming does have examples like that. And yeah, it's a little bit optimistic, maybe at best, from my memory, in terms of like, I think if I remember right, the guy pretty much does like just about three resets over the course of less than a year before he's deadlifting like 180 kilos or something like that.
Yeah, it's a super linear, like maybe one reset, one or two reset, like
Yeah.
going from 135 to 405 type of progression, right? And
Yeah.
it is like I'm like what that does is it plants this idea in your head that like this is the way it should be. and like
Mhm.
most of most of it is not going to be that. And you grinding out reps at 275 does not like bode well for you getting to 405 in the next like 3 months, right? And
No.
it's hard because I've been there. I've done the same thing. Like I literally went and I squatted 355 for 5 on like my wedding day after gaining like 40 pounds. And it was like it was awful. It sucked. I was like,
Yeah.
and it was like that's how you should feel like if you were gonna do like a max attempt type of powerlifting
Mhm.
thing. And I think we get it in our head that like, oh, if I do this, then it's gonna be something's good's gonna happen. It's like, no, really, like this is a
Yeah.
long-term game, right? Like it's kind of just about I really am thinking more and more like I want to train in a way that I still want to compete. Like I just signed up for Olympic lifting meet um in April. But like I just want to play sports. Like I want to go play tennis. I want to go play basketball. I want to feel good. I want to train relatively hard and I want to go play sports as long as I can because I love playing sports.
Yeah. Yeah, well, to bounce off what you're saying there, like I think it's really important to dig down to why somebody wants to do the fitness thing and the training thing and like why those goals matter to them. And it's only really something that I've started trying to do a lot more with clients in the last couple of years when I've realized how important it is. And sometimes, unfortunately, you can ask enough questions that you get to a really hard spot where maybe the reason that they're struggling with something is actually caused by something that's going to require a lot of effort on their part. Like, it could be that they really don't enjoy the job they're doing, and training is like a major stress relief for them.
Hmm.
And they keep on hitting a roadblock with making progress because they just have all of this energy being sucked out of the rest of their life by a really demanding job or a relationship that isn't good or something like that. And that can be tough because, there's only so much you can help somebody with that once you reach that point, but at least you can lead them to getting to that point where they might be able to start becoming aware of it. But the other thing as well that you said there that really resonated with me was like sometimes you set like these goals in your mind for like lifts that you want to hit or something like that, and you get there and it's not. It reminds me of like when I finished my last day of school and I thought like a rainbow was going to shoot across the sky and I was going to know exactly what I was doing in my life and everything was going to be perfect. And it's really anticlimactic because you're expecting too much from that realistically very small thing. And like when I squatted 200 kilos, that was something that I had been dreaming of for like years. And it was like my main aspiration for um training squats or even just training lower body. Like it was this thing that seemed so far off in the distance. And I got it and I was happy, but it wasn't as happy as I expected I was going to be. And in many ways, I was more proud of the fact that I put in so much work for such a long time aiming at that. But then it was also kind of demotivating as well because I was like, I know how much work that took. Like I was only talking to a friend recently about this, who has been training for a similarly long time and has pushed really hard on the strength training stuff. And I think when you've been doing it for a while, you can basically realize how much work goes into hitting the next PR and whether or not you really want to do that or not. And like you were saying there, I've become a lot more interested in trying to build more kind of general athleticism because it just seems like something that makes me enjoy my training an awful lot more. I remember I watched or rewatched for however many times I've watched it, The Phantom Menace. I was looking at like Darth Maul and I was like, he's so cool. And there's something about like that, the general athleticism of like a Jedi or a video game character like Solid Snake or something like that. And when I think about it and break it down, that's so much more than squat, bench, and deadlift. Like that's the ability to jump, to move, to be conditioned. Um, and so, yeah, I've become a lot more interested in the idea of just building like general athleticism and being like really adaptable and capable in lots of different ways. That was a huge tangent from, I can't even remember where you started there, but
Well,
That's
I
kind of
love
where
I
I'm at
love
with
that
my
you tied
training.
in because you went from the deep emotional problems that humans have that they don't recognize that as coaches we often do. Like honestly, man, I've got people that have been on my roster now for since I started my business, so almost 3 years.
Same. Yeah.
And it's oh man, it's awesome. Like I literally love these people.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just want to be like, yeah, like quit your job. Like
Yeah.
quit your job and stop working with me and go find something that is less like stressful or demanding and you just can kind of be happy, right? And you took that, which is very true because it's with humans it's never the thing we think. Like the Apple Watch is not about time. It's about how I feel with an Apple Watch. Am I an Apple Watch person, right? Like
Yeah.
am I that like there's always these deeper levels of everything, right? I actually so I encouraged the people in my like community to like think about their why. Like why are you even training? What's it about? Right? And it's not usually just that you want to squat heavier. It's like that you were a chubby kid or that you got picked on or that you were unathletic or that feeling that getting stronger makes you feel good, right? Like
Yeah.
it it is a stress reliever, right? um or that running is like your release and you want to be able to keep doing it for a long time. But then yeah, like then you took it to Darth Maul, which is arguably like the most sick, as not good as the Phantom Menace was, which I have a hard time criticizing stuff because like I just can't. It's not
It's
my
a great
nature.
nostalgia trip of a movie,
It
but yeah.
100%. When
Yeah.
he comes through those doors and he busts out a double lightsaber, like me,
Yeah.
like 9-year-old me or 10-year-old me was like, this is freaking sick, right?
Yeah.
And like I really do think there is something to, you know, I'm gonna hopefully get into another spring soccer league, and yeah, being able to play like you know strength training and training in a way that makes me feel good when I
Yeah.
play is what I'm about now because I realized after kind of focusing on like powerlifting esque stuff for a few years, and I went and played rugby last or 2 years ago or last a fall ago, like a year ago. I was way stronger and I
Hmm.
was like physically still decent, but like I didn't move very well. Like
Yeah.
you know, like I strained muscles multiple times. So like tackling people and stuff was better, but like my athleticism was like low, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is where I think the general, like where I went astray, like from out of physical therapy school, not to say astray, like CrossFit made me at least like functional, like more functional, like doing a bunch of different things. Didn't
Yeah.
necessarily make me strong, but then I went and I like did the starting strength stuff, did the more powerlifting stuff, and it's like that's great. Being stronger was cool, but yeah, it does just get you into this mindset that you, especially until you learn to like really auto regulate, which I think takes a while, to
Hmm.
be patient. Like you're just stressing yourself in a way that like your joints start to not feel good. You don't move very well. And in the long run, like it's better than not doing anything. And there's so much variability and individualization here that I don't want to make it seem like it's super linear path. But a lot of people they just like stop being able to move well and then they
Hmm.
blame it on the sport or they blame it on their age, whereas like really it was just your training, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that similar thing happened to me where I became very focused on the numbers in those key lifts. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but the problem that happens to a lot of people and happened to me, maybe it's the same for you, is that optimizing that and making those numbers come as fast as possible starts coming at the expense of other stuff then that I ultimately paid for down the line. So like the thing I've noticed with doing a little bit more variety in my training, like having running in there, having some jumping stuff, having the calisthenics stuff, you can still lift pretty much the same weight wise, or I found anyway. And in many ways, doing all that stuff has like benefited my lifting, I think. But the problem is that you have to really accept that it's going to take longer. So like, for example, my bench press, so when I was dropping weight, I basically decided I'm just not going to really do bench press very much because I'm just going to get sad because it's just going to be like
Yeah.
every week it's just going to be more and more weight coming off the bar. So I was like, I'm just going to do calisthenics because that way at least I'll be rewarded for more body weight coming off, and I'll be able to get stronger on the stuff that I don't really train that often.
Hmm.
It meant that when I went back to bench press, my bench press was really crap.
Yeah.
And it's still not back to where it was, but it made a big jump recently in the last month. Like I was stuck around like honestly doing reps in like the 70 kilo range was taxing. But I was also doing things like dips and behind the neck presses and push-ups and dumbbell bench and getting stronger on those. So it wasn't my main focus. And then recently it was like I got stronger on all that stuff, and then my bench press just kind of caught up. And then I got up into like the mid to high 80s now for sets of like 5 plus. And that's not too far off. Like once I'm pushing up into like the hundreds for reps again, that's getting pretty close back to what I used to be able to do.
Hmm.
But it takes a lot longer than if I didn't have any of that other stuff in the background and I was just doing bench press 3 times a week. Definitely would come back faster. But you know, it'd be very easy doing that to lose sight of the fact that maybe I'm putting on a little bit too much body weight.
Yeah.
Whereas when I have dips and pull-ups in the mix, I notice if I'm starting to get a little bit too chunky, or like if there's running and conditioning in there, I notice if I'm not eating well. Um, so that's the main thing I've noticed from not stopping doing the major barbell lifts, but just not having them as the only thing that determines whether my training's going well.
Yeah. I think that's a good general like heuristic, is like have multiple things to like gauge your training upon. Um, and I think one of the things that I've encouraged people more is and we both are like Jim Windler fans. Uh,
Yeah.
for just something about like the nostalgia of, I honestly think it's like if I went back and like ran 5-3-1 again, because of just like honestly better technique understanding, just better understanding of programming. And honestly, like people ragged on 5-3-1 because it was like didn't have enough volume. I'm like, honestly, like for what it was, like it's not the most evidence-based program, but it's like a really solid program. And like honestly, like volume, when I've been relatively successful, it hasn't been super high volume from the strength side of stuff.
Yeah. Not on the barbell lifts anyway. Yeah.
100%, right?
Yeah.
So, and just the acknowledgement that like you should run, you should do some other stuff. But
Yeah.
like rep PRs are fun. Like,
Yeah.
trying to set 10 rep maxes, 6 rep maxes, pushing for AMRAPs, like
Yeah.
that is the type of stuff that it is it's meaningful, and it is just another gauge, right? As opposed to just, oh, is my 1 rep max moving up, right? Um and that's like something that I've encouraged more and more. And then also just like do you follow Travis Mash at all?
Yeah. The weightlifting coach.
Yeah, he's just
Yeah.
like like I don't really know a ton about. I know he does some more velocity based stuff, but I think one of the things that I take away from like him is like, you want people to like, you want your kids or you want your athletes like set a PR every time you're in the gym, like whether it's
Yeah.
tricep push
Good.
downs or
Yeah.
XYZ. And because it feels good. It's like, yeah, I did 20 reps on tricep push downs at 115, or all right, like is that really super meaningful? No, but I set a PR today, so that's good, right?
Yeah. It's a psychological win.
Yeah. Which is, in our case, I think we'd both agree, is probably the most meaningful stuff, because just staying psychologically engaged is huge, right?
Totally. Because, well, one thing that Wendler said recently that I've really thought about a lot, and was actually key to me getting through that little bit of like a plateau in my bench press training, was actually being okay with things being plateaued and not moving for a while and just continuing to keep doing the work, because it's kind of what's meant to happen.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not possible to just keep adding weight every single week. You would have to be lifting 1,000 kilos more within a few years if that was just like the way that it goes. So, um, I think part of the success of maybe like methods or programs that have that bit of variability in there, where people are able to set PRs on things that really aren't all that meaningful, like a tricep pushdown, or maybe it's like a sit up or something like that. is that it just distracts from that a little bit. That really, it's still taking the same amount of time for you to break through the plateau, but you're not just going in and doing the same thing week on week, feeling like you're stuck in a rut. I personally don't really mind that. I like doing the same things for the main lifts quite a bit, but I get my variability from the assistance work. And I also have started trying to have at least one slot in my own training and a lot of clients training as well. That's kind of like, I don't know, almost like a wild card or adaptability kind of exercise where I'll throw in something that they don't actually really do very often, or they maybe have never done before, just to kind of challenge their ability to learn a new movement and also have an opportunity to, set a PR on something they've never done before.
Yeah. There's two like big things, and so like the other person, like, so Alec Blennis, do you follow that guy? Like the
He's great, and he's a freak athlete as well.
dude,
Like that guy,
incredible.
if I was gonna pick somebody who kind of exemplifies that whole like Darth Maul, Solid Snake kind of like
Yeah.
um jack of all trades, but in like I'm really fucking good at all the trades kind of
Yeah.
way, like that
Yeah.
guy is insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he made a post, and it was like this. It's something that has been stewing on my mind. It's like training. What most people do when they like are trying to program hop, or a lot of coaches are doing with people, like when we like maybe like take a 3 step forward, 2 step back approach, is we're just
Mm,
trying to like make people feel like psychologically that they're making progress. And it's like really like a lot of the time you're probably going to be like stuck at a weight or stuck in a range for a while, because like that's where
yeah.
you're actually learning to adapt. And what we try to do is like go around that by like going back and then ramping back through. And then like, maybe you get lucky and you go through the plateau eventually, but it's probably the same exact frame of time that would if you just stuck at like what was basically
Yeah.
RP 7 or 8 and challenged yourself. And we're okay with the weight. The hardest part, dude, is just not adding weight to the bar. Like
Yeah.
so I'm doing an Olympic lifting meet, and it's like where I'm at with my snatches is like probably most of my training needs to be in the 70 to 80 kilo range for me to
Mhm.
eventually hopefully get to where I'm snatching like 95 to 100, right? But what I do is I think like, all right, I'm going to push for 90 this week or whatever, and it's like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't happen, right? And it's like cuz you haven't gotten good enough at the level to then level up. Like I really do
Yeah.
think this sounds like woo woo as hell, but like it's kind of like it's like quantums. It's not like this stepwise thing. It's like you get good here and then you just kind of bounce up to maybe, where you
Mm.
got about 5 to 10% more in the tank, right?
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing, but I think that's just also kind of like nature in a nutshell, right? And but yeah, I think what we do, I think what was when I was coaching CrossFit, one of the gyms I was at is like, just do whatever you want for our warm ups. Like, just you can do whatever you want for the warm ups. Just like make sure people get a 10 to 15-minute warm up. And
Mhm.
that was like people had a lot of fun because like we just like did like fun and goofy stuff to some extent. It'd be like a sled drag, like lateral movements, like just literally stuff that we weren't going to do in like the WOD, right? And
Yeah.
people loved it because it was just a little bit of variability. They felt good. It wasn't just like sagittal plane type
Mhm.
stuff. And and that's like keeping things fresh for people. The
Mhm.
other person I'm following a lot of is I'm following the people that are probably my biggest influences right now are Will Rattel, um,
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Austin Jokum, who's
Know that name, I think.
his Jokum strength. He's just goofy. Awesome dude. He plays like spike ball, ultimate warm up. Just play spike ball. Like, get your athletes in, play a game. And I'm like, yeah, like that's what people want. People want to have a little bit of a competitive game, and then they want to train, they want to lift, and
Yeah.
then like Angus Bradley, training
Yeah.
variously a little bit. Um, so what what would you tell your like self, 5 years ago? What's changed in your opinion in like how you coach or how you program?
Um, from a coaching point of view, I'm trying to think where was I at 5 years ago. So that was 2019.
Yeah.
I was pretty new into coaching personal training. That would have actually even been one of my first years doing that. Definitely, I would have less emphasis on the barbell stuff. So I'm pretty sure when I first started off, like I was really big into the starting strength stuff. I used to structure sessions where it would be like three barbell lifts in a session and then like a row or something like that. So it would be like squat, bench, deadlift, and like dumbbell rows. And I definitely pivoted from that for a few reasons. One is it takes up a shitload of time, especially
Mhm.
as people get stronger. There's also a paradox where it's taking up a lot of time, but they're having to rest a lot in between the sets. So there's actually all this lost time in between where they could be doing other stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say most of the time that I program for people, um, unless they specifically really want to get good at those barbell exercises and or they're like a little bit more advanced, I'll typically just have one main barbell lift in a session. It's actually very similar to the Cryptea program that Wendler has. I think he uses that with the kids that he does the high school strength and conditioning with. So I might have like say like a bench press as the main exercise, and then I'll have the two other main movement patterns for upper and lower paired in with that. So I basically have like a triumvirate or three exercises in a strength circuit kind of. So it'd be like bench press paired with dumbbell row paired with a split squat or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think beforehand, I would have nitpicked at that, like, well, their recovery isn't going to be perfect then for doing the bench press. And now I'm kind of like, yeah, where they're bench pressing 50 kilos. Who cares? Like they need to just if it means there's like 2 kilos less in the bar than there would have been for the sake of them being able to get through more movements and movement variety and loading in a session, then so be it. And they get a little bit of a conditioning bonus as well from moving between those exercises at a reasonable pace. Like I chat to people when I'm training, but like we're moving, like we're not standing around a lot. I mean, if I don't get somebody through about 6 exercises in a session, there would have to be quite a lot of chat and bullshitting going on.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. That would be different. Definitely, there's more conditioning in there than I would have before, depending on the person. Like if I have somebody who's a runner, there's one woman who I train at the moment who like she would go out and do 5 to 10 kilometer runs. I'm not really going to get her doing like conditioning circuits and stuff like that because it's just not a big rock for her to flip.
Yeah.
So if we get to the end of the session, I'll do more kind of like hypertrophy focused work with her. But definitely there's more conditioning in there than I would have had before for people. And I also view things more from a lens now of as opposed to trying to get people better at an exercise and using that as the main gauge of if they're getting stronger, I now kind of try to view it more as getting them better at a broader movement category. So, for example, maybe when I started off coaching people, I'd be like, okay, I want to get this person's bench press stronger. Now I want to get them stronger at pushing. So
Mhm.
their bench press is going to go up, but it's not going to come at the expense of also working on other stuff as well. And then because they're a beginner, like it all goes up at the same time and benefits each other. So
Mhm.
their bench press is going up, but they're also getting more push-ups or whatever kind of push-ups to an incline or something like that. They're moving more weight on dumbbells. And I also really like trying to progress people on to, you know, maybe like a calisthenic type exercise that just kind of like brings them into that next level of control of their body. So, once people are up to being able to do maybe about 15 push-ups or something to the floor, I'm going to be like, okay, we're not just going to keep that stagnant there. Let's try now challenge you with like getting you to do some dips with the band for assistance and get that moving. Um, so in many ways, like if you look at it broadly and you compare the sessions I do, they probably look really similar. Like they all have a squat, a push, a pull, a hinge, typically in like a 5 to 10 rep range, trying to progressively overload them. But I'd say there's definitely less emphasis on specific exercises. And there's also a little bit more priority given just trying to really build out like a general athletic base for the person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like this is one of the things that so, I'm just gonna qualify like both most of our people are gonna be like either they're like Gen Pop or like runners, right? Like I think
Yeah.
so. Like, I do have like powerlifters on my roster, people who are relatively competitive in that thing. It's kind of crazy because like what I had a couple lifters at a meet like 2 weeks ago, and what they both did would have been like a national qualifying total like 4 or 5 years ago, and like the sports just exploded, so like
Yeah.
they can't cut it anymore. It kind of sucks, but there's
Yeah.
just more and more athletes that are like getting into powerlifting, or more
Key is
people
to keep
just
jumping on sports when they're new and not that many people competing.
exactly right. So that's my that's my goal. uh but like for most people, and I do think like you're gonna feel, there's kind of this like spectrum of okay, super specific, and
Mhm.
but even just like reading like Dan Cleather and then even other texts, it's like really a lot of training, especially even in like weightlifting or powerlifting, like really only needs to be that way for like the 8 weeks before prep, like competition type of thing, or even a
Yeah.
short season of the year. um,
Mhm.
and then it like, and then on the other end of like the specific continuum is like CrossFit, where it's like we're gonna, and it depends on how you view it. Like I'm talking more like activity of CrossFit, not sport of CrossFit. Sport of
Mhm.
CrossFit fit super super like a specific varied way, right? But like I do this. I think most things just fall into the middle. You like commented on me. I commented on a post one time, and you're like, "Yeah, Dave, just being like right in the middle, like voice of reason." And most things are just in the middle. Like what most people need is
Mhm.
a dose of like a strength stimulus that doesn't have to be low bar back squat for 6 weeks in a row. Like, I think learning to like if people can tolerate Zerchers, front squats, back squats, like it's all a
Yeah.
squatting stimulus, right? Like let's just figure out how to get your legs stronger, and honestly, you just feeling like, because at the end of the day, all you're really doing is just sitting your hips down, like
Mhm.
So let's just figure out how to do that and make you feel
Yeah.
comfortable, right? And then a hinge, rowing, pushing, yeah, and depends on what you're training for too. Like I have like a decent amount of women who are going to do this push pull meet, like their first meet. I just want them to feel really confident deadlifting and bench pressing, so we're going to do a lot of that over the next like 8 to 10 weeks. But
Yeah.
then after that comes, it's like, all right, let's go back into doing more just like general movement and getting stronger and feeling good type stuff.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that's one of the big things. There's just so many models and there's so many ways to do things, but there also is just like this kind of, if you take your ego out of it and take like this idea that there's a perfect way, like the
Yeah.
overlap between, like it really just needs to be challenging, progressive, somewhat fun, depending on what you're trying to do, right? Like um I think more and more, like as I get a little older, I do Alan Thrall has been talking more about like hypertrophy training and like the hypertrophy, whatever, natural hypertrophy or whatever. Like it does kind of look appealing to just like, this is my program, and it's you just go in and do it over and over again. There's not a whole lot of
Yeah.
psychological tax, because it's just like, yeah, just go do this program for, your program 4 times a week,
Yeah.
and don't judge yourself. Like you're literally just trying to build muscle. Like you're just trying to, it should be hard, but like if you suck one day, it's like, oh well, I still showed up and trained. And I think
Yeah.
that's really psychologically empowering too for a lot of people, right?
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing that will highlight to most people how ridiculous a lot of the stuff that they're focusing on is if they start training with other people.
Yeah.
I think it's probably one of the biggest contributions that CrossFit has made to the whole kind of like fitness space is letting people see the power of getting together with a group of kind of like-minded people who are similar levels of fitness to them, and seeing that like more often than not, you just need to be willing to push hard um for the time that you're in the gym. Obviously, the details matter to some extent. Like, yeah, you are going to get a different physiological adaptation if you do a set of 100 on bench press versus a set of five.
Hmm.
Um, but like that's not really something that you see play out very often. Usually I get people asking me stuff about like, what does it matter if my grip on the bar is an inch wider? Does it matter if I do 12 reps as opposed to 8 reps? Does it matter if I have the bar in this position on my back or lower down? And that sort of stuff just doesn't really bear out as being super important when you're actually training with other people. And you see, especially if there's somebody who's like just a little bit further ahead than you are, you'll always have to push harder than you currently are to reach that person. You're never going to get to where they are or past them by like getting your foot into a slightly different angle when you're doing your squats, and now you've just unlocked the ability to squat 10 kilos more. Like you just have to be willing to go in and push hard. And I think training with other people is really good because it makes them kind of awaken that competitive element that most of us have. And I don't know if you do 2-on-1s, but I love doing 2-on-1 sessions with people for personal training. Um, because 9 times out of 10, both people immediately start lifting more, start pushing harder on conditioning stuff. It just raises the intensity that little bit because even if I'm standing there with them, a lot of people are pretty comfortable with me, thankfully enough that if they're having a bad day, they're just going to be like, there's going to be a tendency to phone it in more so than if there's somebody else there who's doing the workout with them.
Yeah. I think, it's funny because I've been reading this book called The Expectation Effect, and I just got into the chapter on basically like athletic performance, and perception of fatigue is like one of the first things that pops up. And it's like, individuals will basically, if when you're in a competitive atmosphere, people will push harder and their perception of fatigue is lower, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's like, this is one of the big things that I kind of struggle with all the time, is like, do I want to start like a community based like gym? Because I came from like the CrossFit realm, and I absolutely love it, and I think it's a net positive um for fitness and for a lot of things. I also just kind of hate the tribal nature of everything and how everything kind of
Yeah.
turns into like a clicky thing. Like if you could do, and there is a gym that does a good job as far as I know around me. If you can do the community aspect well and like keep people, I always go towards like the competitive nature of it is like a net positive, but there's still a lot of individuals who like they only need to train 3 times a week, really, and they'll show up 5 or 6 times a week, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, so like this is where it's hard, because like I'm a gym owner. I want you in this space, but
Yeah.
also like you don't need to be here. Like if you're gonna be here, just ride the bike, just like chill, right?
Yeah. And I
And
encountered a lot of people like that when I was coaching in a CrossFit gym. And to be honest, it's funny, like when I had started off in CrossFit, it was kind of, there was this kind of like smugness about CrossFit where there was this implication of like, we're maybe ethically superior to the bodybuilding guys because they've got, eating disorders and they're obsessed with the way their body looks, and it's all about vanity and superficial stuff. And this is different because this is about performance, and this is about, you know, pushing your limits and performance and, you know, working hard. But like what I experienced coaching in CrossFit is that you got plenty of people who had serious psychological and emotional issues. And it was just that the way that the fitness thing was packaged by CrossFit appealed to them trying to manage it in that way, as opposed to the way somebody who's drawn to, say, bodybuilding would. Um, there was still an issue there where like they felt they had to go into the gym six, probably would have gone 7 days a week if we were open. That sometimes they would come twice a day, and every single time they were there, they felt the need to push to a 10 out of 10 effort, finish in a pool of their sweat, exhausted, gasping for air. There was one guy who was like really like this and just could not do a 5 out of 10 workout, couldn't even do a 7 or 8 out of 10 workout. It had to be balls to the wall every time. And it was like their whole self-worth was attached to punishing themselves with these really hard CrossFit workouts. And it's something that still doesn't really get talked about that much because people just don't really seem to see that as an issue compared to somebody who's, maybe going a little bit too hard on their cut for bodybuilding and obsessing over food. Like they're actually really just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. I mean, most of it is, right? Like wider runners who like, there was a great analogy. I took like a course like for a physical therapist. It's like runners are either there was a lot to it, but it was like endurance athletes. It's like runners are either running away from something or running towards something, and you should figure out what that
Oh,
is. And
that's
I'm like,
great.
yeah, right. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's why I got into running. Like, I was
Yeah.
running towards wanting to make the soccer team, but then what it became is this way for me to just like feel like good about myself. It's like I was
Yeah.
good at running. I felt good at running anyway. But what
Yeah.
it turned into was just, and I think at 16 or 17 I could handle it. Looking back, like I was like sleeping in class and I was like physically tired and stuff, and it probably wasn't the best thing, but I could go just run 5 miles balls to
Yeah.
the wall and it felt good, right? And I didn't really ever time myself, but I knew that was like improving my performance to some extent for soccer and
Yeah.
XYZ. But yeah, I think that's what a lot of things kind of boil down to. It's like, hey, what's this about, right? Like, you know, I think we all get into training, whatever, when we do it, we get into it for some reason, and
Yeah.
it's not because we want to like just get stronger. Like that's kind of the superficial thing, or that's what we say, but it's usually like body image or confidence issues or XYZ, and
Yeah.
it's not bad. It's good. It's like an awesome personal development tool. But usually, what it looks like to do it well is to do it like 3 times a week, right? But what we do is we show up 6 times a week because like we think more is better, right?
Mhm.
And that's the tricky part too with a lot of this stuff is I got a few people on my roster. It's like you really in this stage, like, and it's kind of hard because as a coach, it's like you're gonna pay me the same amount of money, but I'm really only recommending that you do like 2 times a week, from like a digital coaching standpoint, and you
Yeah.
go on walks or go ride the bike, right? And like
Yeah.
and I'm just gonna hold you accountable, and like that's worth it,
Mhm.
right? Um, that's one of the hard things to do as like a coach is like you think people want more from you, and it's like really what you want is me to be objective and tell you what you need, or
Yeah.
ask you questions that elicit like, hey, this is what we need. um
Mhm.
so yeah, I got to look up the Cryptia program. I haven't looked up that. I listened to that podcast of Windler and the other Coach Rhodes and the Table Talk one. Man, so good. Like Jim Windler really has his head on really well from like
Yeah.
for just a normal, like for like a guy who you would apparently be like the biggest meathead, or he just apparently would be so mean, but I think he's actually like probably one of the kindest humans I have listened to, because like he just gets a lot of stuff and he's lived life, so I love that. What yeah, what do you got cooking, like how are things in general? You got any new social media things or anything like that?
The most recent thing that I started doing was an online group program called Dysfunctional Gains. So that was just I had a lot of people who were coming to me. They kind of thought they wanted online coaching, and then when they would hear about, what's involved with it, like I'm pretty hands-on with the online coaching in terms of there's quite a bit of time required on the part of the person who's doing it, and it's a lot more than just training. Like there's check-in calls and um habit coaching around sleep and nutrition or whatever the person is struggling with. And a lot of people, I would get the feedback like I really just want a program. And as a coach, it's difficult to I suppose marry that with like me being able to deliver something to somebody that's going to be good but also priced accordingly for the amount of time that goes into making a program for somebody when they're, usually looking for something pretty specific. So the longer that I've coached people, I found that like really they don't actually need a super specific program. Um, and certainly if they're just looking to get like a little bit stronger, get a little bit of muscle, get a little bit fitter. So what I decided to do was I decided to make a general program on Train Heroic. And basically it's kind of just like that community aspect of like-minded people who are all doing the same program, group chat on Instagram. It's been going really well. There's a really good bunch of guys on there, and I really enjoy doing the programming for it. And I'll test stuff out in my own training sessions and be like, this is cool, this is working well, I'm going to throw that in for the guys next week. So that's kind of been the newest thing that I've been doing. I also I'm toying with the idea of putting together a more kind of focused, like 6 to maybe 8 week long program that'll be for people trying to improve their strength and kind of those more dysfunctional, quote unquote, exercises like Jefferson curls, behind the neck press, maybe like bent over rows and dips and stuff like that. And get people in and do like a proper kind of like group approach to that over 6 or 8 weeks, where they can do before and after strength testing and group chat and live Q&As and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
haven't put that together yet. And then other than that, just honestly, like I've had a lot on like in personal life and stuff like that over the last couple of months. So I've just kind of been trying to do a really good job with keeping things ticking over with coaching my in-person clients and my online clients, and then, putting up the odd meme on Instagram or, controversial thought of the day type posts. Um, Usually I don't go out of my way to make them controversial. I find out afterwards that they are. But yeah, and that's been it, and rehabbing the back and playing guitar, and that's pretty much it.
That's good stuff. I think one of the things that I think about a lot is like just keeping there's just going to be periods of life where you're just like you're not going to like grow. Like I think growth is a
Yeah.
very good model for life. Like I think you have to, and sometimes you may be growing laterally, right?
Mhm.
Uh but just keeping the ball rolling. And social media is such a toxic environment too. Like it's hard to like show up and post authentically when like,
Yeah.
or you put out a post that you like I put out a post on like stress that I was like this is a game changer like a month ago and like crickets and then you
Oh
post
man, it happens
something
so many times.
right and that's like something that's just stupid is like
Yeah.
does well. And yeah, I think the group dynamic, the group programming, I think that's a really cool prospect. And it is hard because I had a guy who a great client, he's like, yeah, it's just like what you do is almost like more than I want. I just kind of want the program. I'm like, and
That's okay, you
yeah,
know?
that's okay. I think the thing that I think is tricky is there's just some people like you're not like uh if what I ultimately want for a lot of people is like I just want you to stick with it because that's really
Mhm.
the main thing is like you got to enjoy this long enough to reap the benefits. And so much of the fitness industry is just built around like making it seem like it's going to happen fast,
Yeah.
or honestly you get roided out or just like super lean like females who make it look like this, this is what happened when you train for 8 weeks. And it's like no, like it's not how most people are going around and like their fitness looks like it really is just
Mhm.
something that can benefit you from a quality of life standpoint. And we really don't want to do anything that detracts from that, really, right? Like
Yeah.
whether that be like you're training too much and it's causing you to be injured or it's mentally making you feel shitty. Like it should be like a net positive, right? And that just
Yeah.
requires time in the game. So no, dude, this was a good
Yeah,
chat.
look, just to go back to what you were saying there about like, you know, trying to be authentic on social media, like it's definitely a test in emotional resilience, because it's very easy to talk about being authentic until, it doesn't get a response that you
Yeah,
would like it to, you
yeah,
know?
100%.
Um, and so the key with being authentic, I think, is to be okay with that resulting in less attention, less likes, less followers. But the way I always try to frame it, to stop myself from having a mental breakdown, is that those people who are there are higher quality in terms of they like you for you. You
Yeah.
know, I'd
Yeah.
got stuck in a loop for longer than I should have of just putting up memes. As much as I love making memes, um, a lot of people were just there for the memes and they weren't interested in anything to do with me or my business. And as much as I love making a Chad and Soy Boy meme as much as the next guy, it's not my objective in life. It's something that I do here and there for the crack, and it helps me kind of relay messages to people in a more digestible way. But, if showing more of who I am or clients that I work with or my ideas or thoughts about things outside of the scope of a silly little meme means that there's not as many people hanging around. It's easier said than done, but that is something that, I've accepted as a trade-off. And I think that can extend to anybody, regardless of whether they have a business page or not. Like if you're going to use social media, um, it's you kind of have to choose between, I guess, either the path of just going for what is going to always lead to positive responses from people, and that can make it like a really poisonous or toxic place. Um, or you can be a lurker who posts nothing. That probably is one of the most positive mental ways of using it. Or the other one is to, if you're going to use it a lot, being authentic, and that is a lot harder, definitely.
Yeah. I think, and that's what some I gained, like I'm still relatively small, but one of a post from like Valentine's Day, so like has got 42,000 likes, and I've gained probably 1,000 followers from it, probably 1,200 followers from it, and it's like,
Wow.
are there
What post was that?
prospective clients in there, or prospective athletes that might want to work with me? Hopefully, but like
Yeah.
most of that's just like, people resonating with the post, maybe people resonating with the brand a little bit, but like that's the other thing. It
Yeah.
becomes very much like, well, what am I on here to do, right? And
Yeah.
some of it is messaging, like some of it is like optimism amongst, life, optimism amongst life, like being somewhat contrarian to certain narratives in the health and fitness space, right? Helping people
Hmm.
just, I do look at it this way. If I can help people look at pain differently, that's a positive.
Yeah.
If that gets them to want to work with me more specifically, great. But yeah, it's hard to show up as yourself, because then you're opening yourself up to criticism of you directly, right? Of like who you are. And that's like a scary thing. Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely like it is hard. It is addicting. Social media can be addicting. Like I mean, it's obviously it's what it's built around. It's like, oh yeah, you got likes and stuff, and it's really not about that.
Yeah.
The posts that are probably the ones that like are most meaningful are the ones that like are I get like 30 likes, and it's those people actually like are vibing with it, right?
Yeah. And
Um,
it's amazing sometimes the times that I'll actually have somebody in real life come up and say, hey, I really liked what you said in that post, or that really resonated with me, or it really had a positive effect on my training or my outlook on stuff or whatever. A lot of the time, I'd say more often than not, I'm usually surprised and I'm like, really? That post got like 20 likes or something, and I thought it was an absolute flop. And they're just like, there's a lot of people out there who don't engage in the way that is easy to measure, like a like or a share
yeah,
or a comment, but that doesn't mean that they haven't looked at it and taken something away from it. And then, like you say, you could put something up that goes like almost semi-viral, and you never hear anything back from it about anything from anybody. That just was like 10 seconds that was really entertaining to them, so they hit the little like button.
100%. Yeah, it's just it's an interesting game. I think like net positive. Like I have a business because of Instagram. Like it's been good. I've been successful, but a
Yeah.
lot of it's still just word of mouth. And like I really just think Instagram is just like the modern day website for people like you and me, right? So It's just getting people to know, like, and trust us, and then hopefully be in business, right? Or want to do
And
something.
hey, we don't know each other if it isn't for Instagram.
100%. That's super true, right? So
Yeah,
that's positive. I mean, and when I come to Ireland, I'll have somebody to potentially meet and have a beer with and hang out with. So that's
absolutely,
cool,
man.
right? So,
100%.
yeah, where can we find you on Instagram? And then, yeah, how do people sign up for Dysfunctional Gains on Train Heroic?
So the page on Instagram is dysfunctional patterns. Um, and if you want to, I can give people who are interested a free week trial of dysfunctional gains. So if they shoot me a message on there, I can send them a link for that. And yeah, I obviously have in-person personal training if somebody's based in Ireland, and I do online coaching as well. There's a link for booking a discovery call to learn more about that on my page too. So if in doubt, just send me a message basically.
Love
But
it.
yeah, dysfunctional patterns on there, and I also have my own podcast, Philosophy of Strength, on Spotify.
I love it. Hey, I appreciate you. I did like the gosh, what's his name? Your meme yesterday. I love the God.
The Alex Jones one.
Yeah, oh my gosh. That was good.
Again, that
Search it.
was that was one that flopped. I think I got like 40 likes on that or
Oh
something, but it
man.
made me laugh so much that I was like, I don't even care. I'm
At
putting
some
this up.
point, I think that's sometimes you just got to go with what makes you laugh, and
Yeah, because there's so many times I make one where I'm just like, I'm just ticking the box today on this one, and it'll get like 600 likes, and I'm like, what the hell happened there?
yeah, 100%. This yeah, I thought it was funny, and just searchers, and I love the pain. Like that guy.
I
God,
love the pain.
I love the pain. Yeah. All right, buddy. Appreciate you much. Thanks for being
Thank
on.
you. Thank you
This
for
will
having me
probably be
on.
out not next week, but like a couple weeks from now. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
whatever. No rush.
Peace,
Cool.
buddy.
Thanks a
Have a
lot.
great day. Yeah. Good luck with the back. I hope it keeps moving in the right direction. I'm sure it will.
Cheers. Hopefully, we'll
Yep.
see.
See ya.